Our first ever Shanks leader is here. If you're a fan of the One Piece films like I am, this deck is an absolute treat. It contains fan favorite characters such as Uta or Douglas Bullet, and it's really friendly for new players or people who just aren't as experienced with card games. I'm going to be sharing my deck list I've been winning with, as well as breaking down every card in the set list. I'm so excited to share this deck with you. Honestly, the only thing that could get me more hype is you guys smashing that subscribe button. The deck contains many awesome cards, and first up is Shanks. Shanks is an active main, once per turn, Don -3, all of your film type characters gain 2000 power during this turn. As we've seen with cards like Zoro, these effects can be extremely powerful, allowing you to boost up low cost characters to easily swing at your opponent's life. Next up, we have our vanilla cards, which are Gordon, Scarlet, Baccarat, Bins, and Dr. Indigo. Typically, these characters aren't that useful in most decks. But in this deck, with your leader Shanks ability, these cards can easily become monsters to swing at your opponent's life. Scarlet does also have a trigger effect that plays him for free. For our first effect card, we have Ain. Ain is a 4-cost, 5000 power, and her effect is, on play, add up to 1 card from your Don deck and rest it. A lot of the different purple archetypes have ramp cards like this, that enable you to get to your higher cost cards more quickly. The blocker for the deck is Ant. She is 2 cost and has 3000 power, but unfortunately she lacks the 1000 power counter that most blockers have. Like every other card in the deck, she does have the film type however, which does make her searchable. Uta is my personal favourite card in the deck. She's a 4 cost, 5000 power with 1000 counter. She's a blocker, and on block you can Don -1 and rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. This is an incredibly powerful effect, enabling you to essentially block 2 attacks or rest one of your opponent's blockers or a key card that you'd like to take out next turn. Karina is the second ramp card for the deck. She's a 2 cost, 3000 power with 1000 counter, and her effect is active main. Once per turn, you may rest this character and trash 1 film type card from your hand. If your opponent has more Don cards on their field than you, add 2 Don cards from your Don deck and rest. Whilst her effect might not always be playable, she does fit what you want from a card in this deck, being low cost and easily able to hit 5000 power just off Shanks' leader's ability. Now for the boy. Gil Tessero is a 5 cost, 6000 power card, who, when attacking, you may Don -2, draw 2 cards. Draw effects are always good in these games, but this card is susceptible to many meta cards, such as Jet Pistol. It's certainly not a bad card, but when Purple has access to cards like Queen in their slot already, I just don't see it getting playtime. Shiki is a 6 cost, 7000 power, counter 1000 card, who cannot be KO'd in battle if you have 8 or more Don cards on your field. This effect is pretty good because it forces your opponent to use effects to out him. Many decks do have access to removal that can out this card, however, so the value in playing this card will either be when you know your opponent can't out it, or when you really want your opponent to have to use their effects on this card and not one of your other ones. Zephyr, or as I like to call him, Zed, sorry American viewers, but that is how they pronounce it in the movie, is a 7 cost, 8000 power card. When he battles strike attribute characters, he gains 3000 power during this turn. This is not a once per turn effect and can be activated multiple times during a turn. The second part to his effect is active main, once per turn, Don -1. This character gains 2000 power during this turn, so you can easily make him a 10,000 power attacker. Like Shiki, he is susceptible to outs in the game, but he's susceptible to less outs than Shiki is at least. The main man himself enters the battle. Douglas Bullet is an 8 cost, 10,000 power, active main once per turn, Don -4, rest up to 2 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less. Then, his character gains double attack. Douglas Bullet is your premier game closer, and I think he'll be a premier game closer for many other builds that run purple too. Shanks and Blurple Crocodile are going to be very happy to have this card. When you need to control your opponent's board, this card does that for you, and then when you want to swing for game, this card allows you to deal 2 life damage to your opponent. Buena Festa is the last character for the deck. He's a 1 cost, 0 power, 2000 counter power card. On play, he is a top 5 searcher for film type card. This does include event. Buena Festa is a card you definitely want to be playing for. Not only can he search, but he also has that all important 2000 power counter that makes him an absolute staple of film decks or any deck running the film engine. Lion's Threat Imperial Earthbind is our first of 2 events for this deck. It is a 3 cost main effect. Don -2, KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. Purple loves KO removal for the opponent's board. The fact that it's also searchable means this card is one your opponent is going to have to respect. It does also have a trigger effect of add up to 1 Don card from your Don deck and set it active. Most cards that ramp don't set it as active, meaning you can play cards like Blast Breath during your opponent's turn off the back of this life trigger. Our final card in the set list is Union Armada, which is a 2-cost counter effect. Up to one of your film type leader or character cards gains 4,000 power during this battle. If that card is a character, that character cannot be KO'd during this turn. This effect, alongside its trigger effect, makes this effect potentially the best event in the entire game. The only downside to this card is that it is locked to your film type card, but it will mean that the cards you want to keep on the field, like Douglas Bullet or Uta, are going to be incredibly hard for your opponent to remove. Up first for the deck list, we have Buena Festa. This, in my opinion, is an absolute 4 of. It's a must. As I said in the set list, this card does pretty much everything you could want it to do. It is a first turn summon for this deck. It's just so incredibly useful at generating advantage for you. I think this card is just a must at 4. Next, we have the blocker package. So I am running the 4 Kurazumi, and then I am running the 4 of the Anne. The reason I'm running 4 of both of these is similar to Kaido Purple. You really want to be protecting your early life. Doubling up on these just means that you can really protect that early life. And the reason I've gone for Anne over Black Maria, even though she doesn't have the 1k counter, it's just because this card blocks Shanks and is searchable through the film archetype. Shanks isn't blocked by 2,000 power blockers, so Black Maria doesn't block Shanks. But Anne does. Just something I'm trying. Maybe I'll go to Black Maria if I find I really want that counter. But for now, I'm liking Anne just because she's searchable. Next, I'm running 3 Karina. I really like this card because she is 2 costs, so she's a cheap summon. She's 3,000 power, so she can easily hit 5,000 power off your leader Shanks ability. Here's the 1,000 counter if you don't want to play her. And when you're heavily Don minusing because you're using your leader Shanks ability and your Douglas Bullet, this card just allows you to very quickly get back up to a Don situation you want to be in. Or if you're not using it for that, you can just use it to swing really heavily at your opponent. Then I'm running 2 copies of Who's Who. I'm tempted to go 2 on Karina, 3 on Who's Who, or something like that. I think Who's Who is just, again, an absolute must for this deck. He's so strong at shutting down early boards. He can stop green from generating too much advantage against you. He's really good into red at shutting down their key players like Nico Robin and that kind of thing, so you can continue to play your blockers. Just a really, really good card. I think you do need to be playing this card in this matchup. This, alongside some of the later removal stuff we see, is just an absolute must for purple right now. Definitely considering taking this to 3. His effect is very simply just a on play, Don -1, KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. And he does have a trigger as well. So you do sometimes see the life trigger off this card, and that is very useful. Another reason I'm considering taking him to 3. We are running 4 copies of Sasaki. I think Sasaki is just a really good 2k counter for purple because he does also have the Dawn ramp effect and the 4,000 power stat line, which can swing at your opponent's leader quite nicely. So I think he's just a really, really good 2k counter because he does have things you might want to use on summon. Mostly you're just using this guy as a 2k counter. I'm running 4 copies of Ayn. I've forgotten how to pronounce this one. It's been a little while since I saw Film Z. I really like this card. I think for this deck, she is the better ramper. It's a shame she doesn't have the counter. I really like her for this deck though, because you can dump her off of Karina's ability if you want to use Karina to ramp quickly back in the late game. She does have 5,000 power. Off leader Shanks becomes 7,000 power, so she can clear big cards for you if you want her to. Does ramp you one back. I think this card's just really strong in this deck. A card I can see myself sticking at 4 of for a very long time is Uta. I think Uta is basically going to be a 4 of in anything that plays purple. I think I'm probably going to play 4 of her in my Blurple. I'm probably going to play 4 of her in my Kaido. I just think this card is way too good at dealing with wide board states. She's really good into red-green lore as well because she does rest those 5 costs, which is a really important number against that deck. It's just such an incredibly versatile and good effect, as well as the fact that she's just a blocker. If you just need to protect your life, she just does that for you. And in this deck, again, she can be 7,000 power if you want her to swing off your leader ability. Just such an incredibly good, versatile card. Huge Uta fan. Next, we have the 4 copies of X-Drake. X-Drake, in my opinion, is probably, bar none, the best 2k counter in the game. You can see arguments being made for cards like Otama and that kind of thing. But X-Drake is a card that I would want to run 4 of if he wasn't a 2k counter, because I just love his on-play ability to rip 1 card from your opponent's hand. X-Drake is literally an on-summon. You go 1 advantage over your opponent, or you start to claw advantage back on your opponent. It's just free advantage. Like, this card is so good. I love this card so much. I always run 4 of it in anything that can play purple. I know in my original Blurple list, I didn't have 4 of this guy. I've corrected that now. I've seen the error of my ways. I am an X-Drake fanatic. Next, I am running 2 Queen and 2 Guild Torso. This is only because I am still waiting on my second copy of the purple starter deck. I'm waiting for it to turn up, so I don't have 4 Queen to run right now. If you have 4 Queen to run, just play the 4 Queen. Queen is better. Queen is better because Queen is a blocker. Queen's effect is instant. It's a less Don minus. There's plenty of things to trash. Queen as counter. Queen is just a better card, I think, than Guild Tesoro. Although Guild Tesoro isn't bad, particularly if you really want a card in this slot. You know, you think you've got enough blockers with the 12 you have before this. You don't want to run 60. Maybe you just want to run Guild Tesoro because he synergizes with the deck and allows you to draw without trashing. Maybe that's something you want. Next, I am running 2 of the King. King is just such a good card. The fact that this card is 6 cost, I think, is getting away with murder. Like, he just removes so many cards for you very easily. He doesn't feel that bad to play on curd because he's only a Don -1. His effect to KO of 4 or less is it just hits so many good cards in the game right now. The 7,000 power is so good at hitting your opponent's life. I love King so much. It's just one of my absolute favorite cards in the game. I run it in anything that plays the color purple. Speaking of favorite cards in the game, I have become a huge fan of Mr. Douglas Bullet. That's why I'm running him at 3. Again, he is a card that can be discarded with Karina if you're really trying to claw back your Don. So I don't mind running this at 3. I don't mind seeing dead copies of this. Running it at 3 means that you aren't seeing it way too much. Maybe means sometimes you're seeing it a bit too little, but then you do have Queen and Karina and these kind of cards to get rid of it when you are seeing it too much. The way you play this deck is you summon your X-Drakes and that kind of thing. You just bully your opponent's card advantage down. You make sure that your opponent doesn't have too much on board, doesn't have too much in hand, and when you reach that point of the game state, Douglas Bullet uses his double attack effect to just start absolutely decimating your opponent's life. This deck can close games so much faster than any other deck I've seen. I think maybe even faster than Purple Kaido, just off the double attack effect, and off Shanks' leader ability, enabling you to very quickly hit big numbers on a lot of cards. This deck and Kaido do share a lot of similarities in that they both want to wait till the late game, summon their big boys, and then very quickly close the game. I just absolutely love Douglas Bullet. I'm a huge Douglas Bullet fan. He gives this deck so much board control, so much ability to close games. This card is fantastic. Such a good card. This card as well is definitely going in my blur pool. I'm running 2 copies of 9-cost Kaido. I could see myself going to 3 on this card just because the rush effect is really strong, but you do heavily Don minus in this deck. That's why I prefer Douglas Bullet in this deck over this rush Kaido, but that's just a personal preference thing at the end of the day. I love that for Douglas Bullet, you can just discard him for Karina, and then, hey, you're not so Don minus anymore. But Kaido, we know Kaido is an exceptional card. We know the rush is incredibly good at closing out games. We know that removing a 6 cost instantly off the field can be incredibly strong as well. So I just really like this card. I think he's really good, and I think pretty much anything that can run purple probably should run this card. Next, I am running 4 Union Armada. This is because I am running something like 20, maybe 23, 24 film cards in the deck. I'm not sure exactly how many fill cards I'm running, but because I'm running so many film cards, Union Armada just means that they don't die. And then if I'm not using it on a film card, I can just use it on my leader instead. And it has a very good life trigger if I'm Don minusing too much and I need this back. I actually find that with this deck, with the Douglas Bullet though, you're mostly just kind of swinging offensively than playing defense. It feels less defensive than Kaido this deck. If you need some powerful defense, this card offers it to you. Lastly, we run in the 2 Teabag. This card just offers you 4,000 power, so it's an incredibly good counter. Also, you are using the life effect on this card to ramp in this deck, because this deck does need ramping quite a lot of the time. You could split this 3-3 with Union Armada, but that's just personal choice. It's up to you. Personally, I found the 2 Teabags right now to be the value I want it at. A massive thank you for watching this video. I'd really appreciate it if you could like, comment, and subscribe if you did enjoy it. I put a lot of time and effort into editing and making this video for you guys. I'm really trying my hardest to produce higher quality content and keep improving with every video. If you have any feedback, please let me know in the comments. I respond to every comment, and if not, I'll catch you guys in the next one.